and I hope everybody's doing great. I look forward to us having a good meeting. We running just a little behind, but we will get ourselves started and get things ready to go. Yep. If you guys would join us for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. I'd like to go ahead and call our meeting to order, and we have with us today, we have Bob Perry, member of the board on the end here, and Brian Marble, trying to give me a different name to mess me up already. Brian Marble here, vice chair, myself, Michael Fortune, and Rowan Cecil here on the other side. We'd like to excuse Joe Chambers. He has family commitments and does not be here tonight.
And Tyler is on virtually.
And Tyler, there he is on virtually. Okay. Yes. So
I'm voting, so I'll pay attention.
And vote remotely. Is that correct? Yes. Okay. Sounds good. All right. Our first point of business that we need to take care of is the approval of minutes.
I have a question, Chairman. We approve all 4 of those minutes, or do we have to do them one by one?
Scarlett, is that we have to do them one separately?
Well, you could do them all,
Okay.
unless you want to pull one out because you've got changes or something,
Okay.
but you could do them all.
I looked at them and did not see things for changing. Anybody else?
Look at them all. Yep.
You've looked at them all and everything?
I do have some changes
Number 8,
for
December
the
22nd, October 13th, and December 1st, 2021.
I'll second that.
Thank you very much.
Can you guys hear me?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Okay. We will, would you mind grabbing the list of those that wanted to speak?
Sure.
Please. Thank you. There was a sign-in sheet for anyone who had a desire to speak during the public comment section of the meeting. And
Everybody sign in that wanted to.
if you have would like to speak on an issue that is on the agenda tonight, we can wait for that to come up and then have you speak. If it's something different, we can certainly have you come up and speak now.
Oh, hold on just a second.
Sure.
Tyler, can you hear us?
Yes, can you hear me? Hello?
There you go.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
There were some errors on the September 8th minutes that I was trying to call out.
Didn't hear you there. So,
So you need a motion to reopen
okay.
minutes.
I'll look for a motion to open,
I move to reopen the minutes for September 8th, 2021.
I'll second that. Okay. What did you find there, Tyler?
On several of the items, in terms of the vote, it has both myself and Joe voting. All members were present. I believe Mr. Cecil arrived late, so we thought that we would be voting, but so you'll notice that there were several items where a motion and a second were made, but then among the yays, it has both myself and Joe Chambers voting. Both, as far as I can tell, both myself and Joe did not vote in any matters that evening.
Okay.
So, Tyler, then Cecil showing on each vote then as well?
Yes.
Correct.
Okay,
Thank you. Okay. Perfect.
move that we approve the amended minutes for September 8th, 2021.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much. Motion passed. Okay. I hope I say this right. Nisha Perry, is that right? Perfect. We were, after approving the minutes, we were moving over to the public comments. But because you have an agenda item, if you'd like to wait till that item comes up and talk then, or is that okay?
Sure.
Or you can come up and address us now, but ideally it would be
That's okay.
where
I
we,
can wait till
yeah,
my turn.
we have Scarlett present
Yeah.
the things and then allow the representative to come up with that as well. Is that okay?
Yeah, that's good.
Perfect. Okay. Anybody, any other comments? If anybody has anything they'd like to open up for. Okay. Then we will close the public comment section of the meeting and we will go to our first item, number 1. And Scarlett or Ryan, or you? Tyler. Okay. Item number 1 is the swearing in of the new planning commission chair.
Just a little background, since Michael was sworn in as a member years ago, we're doing a new swearing in because of becoming the new chair. We're taking on new responsibilities and so forth. So Michael, please raise your right hand. Michael Fortune, do you solemnly swear that you will support, obey, and defend the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of this state, and that you will discharge the duties of your office with fidelity?
I do.
Thank you.
Thank you, Michael, for your willingness to serve.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike.
Thank you, everybody. I appreciate that. We'll see how you feel at the end of the meeting. All right. There is here. We have no items for the public hearing. So there's no need to go on with that. The next was legislative items and legislative actions, and we have no legislative actions to take at this time. So what we will do, yes.
Ryan, we get this screen here, board.
Yeah, I didn't know it wasn't.
How are you? No, I think we're okay. 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 Dave Beckett. Yeah, super. Good to see you. Okay, we are moving on to our administrative actions. It's item number 2 on the agenda. The Singleton subdivision final plat. The Planning Commission will review, discuss, and may take action on a request to approve a final plat for the Singleton subdivision, a 3-lot with a remainder parcel residential subdivision located in the general area of 810 South, 300 East. Scarlett, I'll turn it over to you to give us an update.
Okay, so this is the second time you've seen Mr. Singleton. You approved his preliminary plat just a few short weeks ago, and he's gone through the final plat stage. When we review a final plat, we look at Utah Code Title 10, Section 9A, Part 6, which is subdivisions. We also look at our general plan and our associated master plans. We look at our own city code. We have a couple of sections in our city code we look at. One of them is Title 8, Chapter 1, Section 21, which talks about the water availability requirement for water dedication. And then the other one is Title 11, Chapter 3, Section 3, which is final plat. And if you look through those findings, You'll notice that there are only 2 items, even though they have red next to them, they're checked off. That's because the developer has done his part and the city engineer just needs to get the addresses for each lot and he just needs to check the boundary description that it will close. And so the developer's done all of his, and Max, our city engineer, will take care of that before the Mylar is printed. So the conclusions is that Providence City has enacted ordinances requiring that a subdivision plat comply with provisions of the municipality's ordinances and provisions of Utah Code Title 10, Chapter 9A, Section 6. Spring Creek, this does have irrigation facilities in it, and Utah Code does require us to notify the irrigation companies, which was done early on, and they did comply with a letter. And the developer has taken that letter into consideration and has put the information that they need into his construction plans. So they are planning on meeting the requirements of that letter. We looked at the general plan, and this area is on the framework map, suggests this area as neighborhood residential development, which is what the applicant is requesting. This is an area that actually is within a 1/4 mile of the geographic level of service for Hillcrest Park, but it's outside the perimeters of all of our other parks. And just a point of interest, not to deter from this development, but this is an area where we do have a gap in park service, not in the immediate area, but just a little bit in the surrounding area. That's what that pink is. And so Ryan Snow has been working diligently to try and get rid of our gaps for us, and he's made some great headway on that. The proposed trails map shows 300 East as a roadside pathway, and the applicant, the developer, has taken that in consideration and does show that being marked on the asphalt when they complete their side of the roadway on 300 East. So that will be taken care of at that point in time. The transportation plan shows 300 East as a local road without limited access, and the road will be designed to those requirements. This development, the 3 lots are along 300 East. The remainder parcel is along 400 East. So there are no requirements for 400 East at this point in time. So on our conditions, we just need to make sure that we as the staff follow up with our city engineer to get the addressing and to verify the legal description. And then the developer needed to address comments from any other staff members, and that's all been done. The final plat, after the final plat approval, but prior to recording the final plat, the developer will need to complete the application for development and public improvement installation. The construction drawings must be approved and signed by the city engineer, and then they'll have to obtain the utility company signatures and complete the owner's dedication, and all security bonds must be in place. And the signatures and the owner's dedication will take place on the Mylar, not on the paper copy. And then we will sign, the developer needs to sign and record the stormwater dedication of grant of easement and maintenance agreement. They are installing an underground storm chamber is what they're proposing. And they will take care of the visual parts of that. And then the city may help with the underground portion. But for the most part, everything is the developer's responsibility on that, to monitor that and make sure that it's functioning. Then they will sign and then the last one is that the applicant will continue to meet all relevant federal, state, county, and Providence City rules, laws, codes, ordinances. Approval by the city of any application or paperwork submitted does not alleviate the owners and or their agents from their responsibility to understand and conform to local, state, and federal laws. Providence City's approval is not intended to and cannot be construed to allow any laws to be violated. So at this point in time, the recommendation would be that, and the developer has, you can ask them, but so that they can verify, but they have received copies of the application for development and infrastructure installation and the dedication of the easement for the stormwater facilities. So they've received everything that they need in draft form so that they have a chance to weigh in on it. So that, excuse me, that being said, this one is ready for your approval.
Thank you very much.
Questions, Scott?
Sure.
This irrigation, looks like there's a stipulation from the irrigation company that they go to bury
Yes.
the tank completely and burn it.
Mhm.
Is it gonna be the city's responsibility? to
No.
make sure that happens?
Well, yes, we will make sure it happens as part of the construction inspections. And yes, but once the developers completed what they need to, that lateral is part of the user's responsibility as well. So
Let's make sure that they-
it will be part of their construction drawing, so we will.
Thank you very much, Scott. Is there anybody representing this action? Yes. If you'd like to come up, state your name and make any comments.
Yeah, my name is Marcus Singleton. And I guess I'm here to answer questions if you have any.
Members, anybody got anything for Marcus? I think it all looks pretty good. Yes.
I like it.
I didn't see any problems, but I thought it was great, as long as the irrigation's thought through. I've been obviously working with the water company.
Yeah, I mean, it was tough at first to figure out what they wanted and how they wanted it, but I think we've got it all worked out now.
Tyler, without having you right over here next to me, I need to make sure you always wave your hand or something. And I want to just check in with you and see if you had any questions that you'd like to ask, either for Marcus or for Scarlett.
And no questions on this. It looks pretty buttoned up.
Okay, thank you. Bob?
Good.
If we don't have any other questions or any concerns,
I move that we approve the Singleton subdivision final plat with the conditions set forth according to the findings of fact. Conclusions of law.
I second that.
we have a motion by Rowan Cecil and a second by Brian Chambers. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye. Marvel. Didn't you give him the wrong name before?
And Chair,
The motion carries. Yes.
and just a point of order with it is since we have Kathleen Alder as a member, Tyler becomes now a non-voting member because when she arrived. So anyway, sorry.
She has to get in those final votes. I understand.
But we still want your input. Tyler, if you see something like you have already, please help us with that. All right. So the motion carries and we're good on that one. Thank you very much. I'm sorry. You're older. You're like older. Okay. Let's move on to item number 3. This is about the Providence City Center affidavit. The Planning Commission will consider and may act on accepting an affidavit from the developers of Providence City Center that will allow them to revise their development plan using the mixed-use district code that was adopted July 21st, 2021, which was after the development was originally approved. Okay, Scarlett, would you like to bring us up to date about that?
So when the development comes in and you give approval, well, actually, when they make an application, if things change, after their application is made, we look at them under the codes that were in place at the time the application was made, if it's a complete application. And so this development, Providence City Center, is a mixed-use development. It's the one that's located along Gateway Drive on the east side of Macy's. We changed the mixed-use code in July, and this development was approved in April. So normally we would be using our former code to review. And they do have a representative. David Knight is here, so you can ask him questions about it. But I talked with, I'm sorry, my allergies kicked in about 20 minutes ago. But anyway, they, after having some discussion with some of their prospective buyers, Danny McFarland and David Knight approached me and said, we're thinking we might like to use the new code for our development instead of the code that we were approved under. So I contacted our city attorney, Chad Woolley, and I asked him what the steps would be. And he felt like we needed to have an affidavit, something in writing with them acknowledging that at their request, they're moving to the new code. And that's what this is that they're letting you know that they understand that they could build under the code that was in place in April when they were approved. But they are now asking to be considered under the mixed use district approved by Providence City Council on July 21st, 2021. So they will fall under the new code. They will also fall under the new code for single family attached and multifamily design standards, because the request for this came in after that code was approved. So we had a change in the mixed use code, which they acknowledged. Then after that code changed, they are asking for a change to the new code. Then we changed. So after the code changed for the mixed use, then we changed the code for the design for the single family attached and multifamily. And then their request came in to come in under the new codes. So they will fall under that both new codes, because this request is after the date of adoption on the single family attached multifamily design standards. So
Does this eliminate approvals that we gave them on the design standards already?
they will have to resubmit some new design standards, because it will change. When we first talked about it, the developers and I, when we sat down, I told them, I said, I don't think you're going to want to do this, because the old code allowed them to have said no one use can be more than 20% or no less than 20%. The new code says no one use can be more than 50%. And their original design had 80% residential. And so they will be redesigning the residential portion. So you will see a revised site plan. We won't go through the subdivision process again, because their lot is the same configuration. Excuse me.
No change in zoning.
It won't change the zoning, but the site plan will change. So you will see a revised site plan in the near future.
Thank you. Any questions for Scarlett? The biggest thing is basically it's adding more commercial and reducing the residential.
It's giving them the opportunity to increase commercial, but it does limit the residential at 50% now.
Everybody good on that?
Yeah.
Thank you, Scarlett.
Yep.
There was a representative here. Could you state your name, please?
You bet. My name is David Knight, live in Providence.
Thank you. And do you have anything you want to share with us or
No.
answer questions and so forth?
I think Scarlett nailed it, as long as you followed all that. We got approved and then some things changed, and now we're basically looking to just adopt, the code as it exists now, and applying that to the development as we go forward.
The only thing in looking at this affidavit and just going through it, I just wanted to make sure that everybody's has the same understanding that It's one of those things that if we go forward with this step, there's no going back to the other. That if something changes along the way that we say, no, we want to come back here, or can we mix and match? It really is by accepting this, then we're moving forward into the new codes and those opportunities that way.
Right.
Sound
Yep.
good, and everything is good with that?
Yeah, and our intention is to sign this upon, so we've got some commercial lots, the commercial portion of it that are under contract.
Yes.
And so we'll be signing this affidavit at closing with that, assuming that it all, goes forward. But as Scarlett mentioned, we've already got design plans. I've got them here, actually going to be submitted in tomorrow. So we're kind of moving forward in this new direction, and wanted to make sure that essentially this affidavit, from what our conversations with Scarlett were that we just all need to make sure that we're on the same page under which code this development will be applied to.
Thank you. Anybody, any questions for David? Everything look good? Okay. I don't believe we need to make a motion for this. I think it's just that we're accepting the affidavit.
I think a motion to accept is appropriate.
All right. So I'll look for a motion to accept it if nobody has any questions. Tyler, did you have any comments?
Oh, looks good.
Thank you.
I do agree, accept.
Vote that we accept. I have a first.
I haven't been able to make a motion in a very long time, so.
I'll second it.
There we go. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
We really like the old one. The old design.
Good. I think you'll like the new one better. I think it'll be good.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. All right, we will move on to item number 4, which is the Perry rezone of parcel 02144-0042 and 02144-0045. The Planning Commission will review and discuss a petition to rezone. These are study items. The next 2 items that we'll do, this one and the following, item number 5. We'll discuss a petition to rezone parcels, the numbers which I just read, which are located in the general area of 177 West, 150 North, and 182 North, 220 West in Providence, Utah. The application was filed by Cannon and Nisha Perry. So Scarlett, do you want to give us an overview about this, please?
So this is just an opportunity for the applicant to kind of explain their thought process to the commission. If you decide, well, actually, if everyone decides they want to move forward, then the next step after this would be the public hearing. So you won't be voting on this tonight. You'll just be getting clarification. The property is currently zoned single family. There's one little error on the application. On page 2, and I think it's just, they were quickly writing. It says current zoning SHF. We don't have an SHF. They have it right in their description down lower, but it is single family residential. It's SFR there. So both parcels are currently zoned SFR, and they're requesting single family high for both parcels. Now, as far as uses go, the uses are very, very, very similar in these 2 zones. The big difference that you have in these zones is that single family residential, the minimum lot size is 10,000 square feet, and the minimum lot width is 80 feet. In single family high, the minimum lot size is 6,000 square feet, and the minimum width at the setback line is 60 feet. So, and there's a little bit of difference on the setbacks. The side yard setbacks in single family residential are 10 feet. The side yard setbacks in single family high are 7.5 feet, so 7.5 feet. But those are the biggest differences in the zoning. One thing, and I kind of hesitate to talk about plans, but I do think it's kind of important, and I discussed this with Nisha Perry the applicant earlier today, the plan that was included in the packet shows a private street. This proposed area is not large enough to qualify. In order for us to look at private streets, it would have to be either a cluster development or a planned unit development, and or they could build a private street. They could keep it private, but it would have to be built to all of the city standards. All streets have to be built to the construction standards of the city so that they can, whether they're private or public, so that they can carry the load of the emergency vehicles and things like that. But private streets, most private streets don't have to be built to our right-of-way standards. That's where we can work with the developers and be creative within their planned unit developments or their cluster developments in order to get a more walkable or some type of a feeling. But in this particular case, it's not big enough to qualify for either of those options. So private street in this particular case would have to be built to the regular city standards for right-of-way as well, which would include curb, gutter, sidewalk, and hard strip, and 30 feet of asphalt. And I did talk to the applicant about that, and I'll just let her answer any more questions. But I do want to remind people, we're only talking about zoning. I just bring that up because I don't want anybody to get the idea that what's drawn here would be an option. Something similar maybe, but not this.
Thank you, Scarlett.
Okay.
Any questions for Scarlett?
Thanks.
Nisha, we would invite you to come on up.
Yeah, thank you.
If you'd like. And even though I announced you, would you please still go ahead and state your name and
That.
tell us what your thinking is, what you'd like to do?
Okay, perfect. My name is Nisha Perry. I'm a resident here in Providence. I may look familiar. We proposed a rezone earlier this fall. After that application, our neighbor, the Jepsons, whose lot is within the block, we've been in touch with them for years and years about the potential for development. And so I think when they saw that we were serious about working on it now, they said, well, we'd like to join you, at least to give ourselves the option, because they're basically landlocked in there. So so what we did is reapply, including the Jepsons land. And then our initial application was for multi-level, or excuse me, a higher density. Yeah. Yeah. And, after after talking to neighbors, we just felt like, based on their input and everything, we would apply for some kind of detached single family.
Questions? Open it up for questions.
Why did you give up on the other, the multifamily high density?
That's a good question.
You compared it to the other high density.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, to answer your question, I think a lot of it was concerns from neighbors. There's a really concerned neighbor that through a second person, I heard her say, I would be okay with single family homes. I just wouldn't be okay with townhomes.
Right.
And personally, I think there's unfortunately this misconception about townhomes, but unfortunately it's there. And so I think to sort of meet in the middle a little bit, that's why we decided to go to this, even though I actually thought the other design was a good idea too.
Do you have you thought about what the opportunities you have to develop that area under the current zoning now?
Yeah.
Would allow you to do the private drive and a couple of lots, because I think the private road, correct me if I'm wrong, it's a 2-lot maximum. That way, otherwise you go to the size and width of public streets and right of way and all of that. Because I believe in looking at the drawing, it's a 35-foot right of way that you have, not necessarily pavement, anything. I think that would have to go to 66. So for something else, but have you thought about that aspect of it?
Yeah, and I'm not sure if, and maybe Scarlett could help us. I don't know if the Jepson's property would become sort of obsolete at that point if we went with the current zone, because now you're asking for 3 properties on the private drive. Am I saying that correctly?
If the Jepson, if that private drive extended for them,
Right,
because they are, there's no way to get to that back.
right. So really under that idea, you're looking at 2 homes that have really giant lots, exceptionally
Right.
big lots compared to the neighborhood.
Because right now, from the drawings, you're looking at 5 lots
Mhm.
with, and the zoning to go down to 6,000 from where it's currently at 10. And so all of those, even, I think a couple of the other ones, they're about 8,000 or just under 8,000. But the last 2 on the Jepson aspect part of it would be quite small, especially when you look at the 35-foot to your requirements to go to the 66-foot wide
Right.
to service all of that.
Yeah, and I talked to Scarlett about that today. It still makes sense to still go for the rezone so that we have the options, but we'll need to retool what that
Yeah.
looks like. And it may end up being 1 less lot because of that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's see. I know you mentioned that you talked to and you got some feedback from your neighbors in regards to the townhouse issue,
Right.
or maybe heard. Have you talked to them about this aspect of doing something like this to get a feel for it?
No, I wanted to come and propose it here first. And then, once we move forward, let them know.
Because the next step would really be a public hearing.
Mhm.
And so, that might be something to think about, of talking with them instead of, usually there's a lot of people that come out of the woodwork for the public hearings.
Yeah.
And so,
And surprisingly, I guess I say surprisingly, we had a lot of support actually for the other plan. And we had neighbors that said, it's your land, you can do what you want. And we had neighbors that said, that's a great idea. How can we get in on it? One of the backyard neighbors said, wow, is there any way I can get in on that? Essentially, I've had other Providence City residents say to me, I have something similar I'm thinking about doing. I'm anxious to see what happens. So I felt like we have good support in addition, to some people that, I get it. It's a beautiful backyard. And
Yes.
who doesn't want that backyard to just stay how it is?
well, it's huge.
Yeah.
It's huge. I had a sister that lived just right behind you there.
Oh, okay. Louise
Cornell.
Toby? Oh, Cornell,
Cornell.
Donna.
Yeah.
Oh, yep. I love Donna. Yeah.
And so, all right, I think it would be good to talk with the neighbors and get a feel, because like I said, the next step is a public hearing where they can, they come forward and they are all notified and so
Right.
forth. And it gives you a better chance to address some things that maybe could have been dealt with before you get to that point. and things. But anyway, I would just encourage that. To get a good feel for what the lot issues, because of the requirements for the full-size road built to city requirements and standards and so forth. And like,
Oh, I'm sorry.
no, that's okay. If you had something to say, go right ahead.
Well, the Jepsons weren't able to be here tonight, and they, again, the uniqueness of what we're looking at, they're essentially going to be landlocked if they don't add to this application.
Right.
But they're not even sure what they want to do, but it just gives them the option of whatever our zone is, theirs would match it.
All right. Does anybody else have any questions about it?
You're proposing the subdivision, and I don't see lot numbers on a few of the lots. Are you proposing change of zoning? And when you come back for a subdivision, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 lots? How
No,
many lots?
5.
Five new,
Yeah,
and then you
plus
have
2.
your two,
Oh,
the two.
yeah, I guess 7, including,
But
yes.
there's one that's unmarked, that's adjacent to the Jepsons.
That line's there, sorry, a little bit, but you agree the way it's almost as if
It's fuzzy.
you have two more lots up here,
I know.
which is really, it was the
And
driveway.
I think he was showing the width and that line makes it look like it cuts it off. Yeah, I
But
agree.
these things are basically.
Oh, they're not gonna put in
Yeah,
a
there's not a
camera
little,
or anything.
well, that would probably be required, but that's down the road, but it's not this here, 1, 2, 3, 4.
It's just two.
Yeah,
Yes.
I agree. It is a little confusing. Yeah,
Yeah, it's a diagram we've got. Okay.
Well, and it's, but like I said, this is just for study and to get a feel and
right.
give us a chance to find out a little more and then also discuss with staff requirements. Yes, Mayor Drew?
That provides the deal.
Yes. Can you come up and
All three
Use
are
the
hard,
microphone.
because you're gonna fade away soon.
I'm almost done.
Yes.
To save the planning commission, the city staff, and the property owner some grief. When I look at that, it says private street, 30-foot private street. That's, you just said now it's gonna be public street. It's not gonna work. It's gotta be 60-foot right of way. So now you've got to carve out those 3 lots there. You've got to carve out, reduce the size of those lots, and now you might have less than 6,000 square feet, which means you don't qualify for the zone. So I think the idea you have the townhomes makes sense last time, because then you could have a private street, and then you didn't have to have a 60 feet dedicated to the city. You could, I mean, it'd be privately owned, privately maintained, but property owners there would be an HOA. And as Scarlett mentioned, that has to be a private street if you're asking for single family high. Did I miss something? Am I off somewhere?
I don't know how many units you have to have for a PUD.
2 acres.
2 acres for a PUD, so I don't think it qualifies
So
for,
what does work? Could be a private street.
well,
2 lot, not 2 lot.
And that's a driveway, not a street.
Yeah,
Right.
it's not a street. It's a driveway that serves as 2 lots. Is the-
So maybe the only other thing that works 2 lots. I don't know.
so you could do a cul-de-sac and have property that comes off the cul-de-sac, and maybe that's 2 lots, and a private drive back to the Jepson's property. So you might get 3, but that's within current zoning. That you might be able to get 3 lots, 1, a private driveway back to Jepson's, and then having a cul-de-sac that's the full city street standard to be able to service the back of your property off of that would allow connection in and possibly could give the split that way. Then you're doing a partial street with, or you're doing your public street as a cul-de-sac portion. Does that make sense? And then you'd have yours come off there, and then a piece come off for a private drive to service Jepson's some future point. 3 total,
Yeah.
but that I think you could achieve within the zoning you have. That's something, anyway. it's a
No,
thought.
I don't think oh, right.
That may be because of acreage size and limitations on the private drive issue. So you're going to upgrade. So come in with a cul-de-sac and then a private drive that goes off, that gets you 3, and that may be something that's
Right.
there.
Do you mind if I just sort of point at something? I mean, I appreciate the input because I just learned this afternoon, Scarlett and I talked this afternoon. So I haven't had a chance to like tool it, but this is part of our land right here. I mean, if we added that back and then subtracted the road and maybe just did 1 here, but 3 here. I mean, again, I kind of just need to go back and look at the map, I guess.
So you're looking to turn Jepson's into 1.
Right.
And if she does the cul-de-sac to service 3 on hers, we think that's a possibility, but it's 10,000 square foot is the zoning now.
I think, I don't know whether you've been to an engineer to ask them just to draw up a concept.
Well, that's who did this.
Oh, the engineer drew that concept like that.
Yeah.
You may take that thought to them and see if they can get the square footage to do that. But I think you're your difficulty will become, you add that private, you get a 66-foot right of way to the Jepsons, and you're not, I don't think you're going to get enough to split their lot. And how much that affects the 3 lots you have would be, and I didn't know how far yours went, I guess. You're saying, yeah. So it goes over a little into theirs because you come straight up here with your current lot,
Right.
straight on that property line. So it's a thought to go back before you go to public hearing.
Right.
Because if you can get what you need out of the zoning you have, then there is no public hearing and you just go on to
Right.
subdivision.
Right.
Public hearing is, it can be sensitive, and in a lot of those, you know, your neighbors will all come and maybe they'll like it, maybe they won't, and it may affect what happens here. But so anyway,
Well,
just
and
a thought.
we've already gone through public notice with our first application. So we've done the hard work of like having those conversations, you know.
Did we have a public?
Didn't have a public hearing, but they went to public notice
Yeah,
and then we pulled it from there. So
Yeah.
public notices still have to go out again.
Yeah.
But
yeah,
The public hearing was for multi-family as well.
Yeah, it was
right,
full
so
before.
That was a different thing.
sure, yeah, exactly.
So it sounds like you just maybe go back and
Yeah.
fine tune a little bit, look
Right.
at the different options. You know, the Jepsons, I think best thing they can hope for is a private drive that got access to theirs off the private street, off the public street coming in.
Right,
The idea of the cul-de-sac gives the ability for a fire engine to turn around and those kind of things that would be required, but you've got some, and then you can juggle with the lot sizes to see just what would work.
mhm,
And the engineer can tell you for certain, if you're under the 2 acres minimum, which would be for the townhouses, then that would make that where it's not feasible. If it actually is over that, the square footage, then that's something that you could do, could look at again.
okay, okay. I'm curious, and it's been a few months, but I'm curious what you guys thought about the townhome, the higher density.
The one thing I would say, and you guys correct me if I'm wrong, is that we didn't even discuss it because it was on the agenda and so it would have been presented, but it got pulled.
Right.
So other than maybe seeing whatever exhibit you had at that time, that was it.
Mhm,
I don't think there was any more.
okay.
If I was developing the property, I would look at higher density, and just take the whole thing private, parking lot in,
Mhm.
and just make sure that it fits in well. I mean, you've got what do they call those houses, the double houses there next to Jim's?
The twins,
Twin
yeah.
homes. Okay, so you got there, and then you go across the street, and you've got quite a few there on Hidden Creek Drive to use as a template. If you
Right.
match something like that, we can have a nice discussion,
Mhm.
and you can defend yourself in case there's somebody here, but we can't really,
Yeah.
we can't really give you any counsel on it, but if I was developing it, I would look at the higher density, make it one parcel only, higher density. I went over and checked out the access there off of what's called 200 North. That's a good access.
Mhm.
It's gonna have to be cleaned up so that people don't drive down that. But it's a great access. It's a great place to split off your parcel.
Mhm.
And there's a lot of places that it shouldn't be.
Right. Okay, I
But
appreciate
it
it.
also says that there's gonna be a homeowner association, neighbors will like that.
Right.
Because that means that those people that buy there will maintain it. Generally, you find that that's.
All right. Any-
I like the higher density also. And we're being pushed by the state to go to that, so. One of these good things.
Mhm.
You just have to look at how you work everything to get the acreage that requires for that capability,
Mhm.
I think. Anything else? Okay, so we would, I think that's all we have to do unless you have anything you'd like to add.
No.
Study items, so we don't.
Do you want this to go to a public hearing at your next meeting? I guess that's the real
I
question.
don't know. I mean, is that 2 weeks? Or is it longer because of the holidays?
Well, it's the-
Could be longer because of the holidays.
The next meeting would be the-
Well,
12th, January 12th would be the next meeting.
I would-
yeah, you've got to find out, that engineer needs to tell you, run the numbers,
Right.
get exactly,
Right,
and then look at it, but,
right.
um,
Although, is that concept plan necessary for these steps?
Not for a rezone
not for a reason,
necessarily,
but
because you can't approve the development, you're just approving the rezone.
And if I understand right, if we went forward with this zone and we retooled it and we only got, 3 total, it's not like I'd have to go back and get a single family residential zone back or something. I would just do it, under the single family high, but just do what I was doing
yeah,
under
the
the current
the
zone.
single family high is your minimum lot size.
Right.
So you could, certainly can make the lots bigger.
Right.
And that kind of stuff like that. But I think it's, well, what would we recommend? That we, you can, so, because there's got to be a certain amount of notice. Is the period of time that we need for the notices,
It's 12 days,
12 days.
12 working days that I'll get the.
I'll see, that could be well, would we have time to?
So we've got plenty of time.
So you guys will be working through Christmas, I believe.
She'll make, this would make us work on Christmas, so,
I'd rather manage expectations better. If that doesn't give us enough time to do what we need.
I think we could make a public hearing work.
What day would you have to send the letters out then? Figuring?
Well, actually, maybe we can't.
Yeah, 'cause the letters,
The letters would have to go out on
those are all.
the 30th. Well, we could have sent them out on Thursday.
I would sit down with your engineer and look at all of the different options. And if it takes an extra 2 weeks, it's well worth
Sure.
thinking it through.
Right. Yeah, I don't
Not to
mind
rush.
if we can even just put ourselves on the next January.
The following one.
Yeah, that's
26th.
fine. Yeah, if
26th.
that sounds good to you guys, that's fine with us too.
So plan for that. If
Okay.
something changes, you
Okay.
can just contact Scarlett. And
Yeah.
let me know. Okay.
Okay,
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Thank you for coming in.
Christmas mission.
Ryan, we lost your camera on the feed, by the way. I think you disconnected it.
Is that better? We good, Tyler?
No, we still don't have a, oh, now it's coming back, I think. Yep, we got you back. The YouTube audience deserves to see all of you.
Take the mic with you when you go back there.
That's good. That's perfect.
Keep it in your lap.
Would you be more comfortable walking around?
I'm
with the
fine.
microphone?
I'm fine, folks. Thanks for worrying about
All
me.
right.
Merry Christmas.
All right, item number 5 on our agenda as a study item is land use code amendment application. The Planning Commission to review and may take action on a request by Dave Beckett for a code amendment to change the setback for accessory dwelling units. Scarlett, do you want to update us? Up there? Yep.
Mr. Beckett actually sent some information to me this afternoon,
Okay.
and Ryan can bring it up on the screen for you. He's made an application. He's following the process. This one again would need to be advertised as a public hearing. Different between this one is, since it's a citywide thing, we don't do mailings to everybody, but Ty will post notices on the website, and can't remember where else we have to post now because it's changed since it changed it in the recent legislation. So, but anyway, he would take care of noticing. And so you could look at this one but this has to go to a public hearing before it goes anywhere too. So this again is just one for the applicant to explain his thought process, you to give feedback, and then kind of chart the course, understanding that it does have to, unless the applicant withdraws it, you can make recommendations, and you can even make a recommendation to deny, but the council's the one that has to do the final action on it.
Okay, thank you very much. And if I can just, before we have Mr. Beckett come up and talk with us, our existing setbacks for an ADU, rear and side, are
for an accessory dwelling unit, they are the same as a primary structure. So it would depend the zone that you're putting it in. But for most of the zones, interior sides would be 10 feet, rear yard would be 15 feet, and if it's on a corner, it would be 20 feet. And the front yard is 20 feet.
It's 25. Okay. Okay. Thank you very much, Carl. Mr. Beckett, if you'd like to come and state your name and give us an idea of what your thoughts are.
Sure. Dave Beckett, resident of Providence. And so when I built a detached building behind my house, and I live in a single family large area, so I have essentially a half acre. And when I was doing it, I was talking to the folks here at the city as far as setbacks and so forth, because I want to make sure that I could exercise the ability to put a accessory dwelling unit in there if I needed to. And at the time they were negotiating the setbacks, and they said, oh yeah, we think that it's going to 10. And I think at the time it was 20. And so I put it at like 12 to 14 is where my building's at right now on the rear setbacks. But when I was looking at the documents on the city website, it talked about detached accessory uses with a 5-foot setback. And so I could have put the building at 5. And I thought, well, I'll just move it a little bit and make sure that I'm further away from the neighbors, and the other homes that surround me are all single family large zoning as well. And so when I looked at the other documents that are on the city's website, there's multifamily homes that have like a rear setback of 10 feet. And I know the idea is to be far enough from your neighbors that it won't cause a problem. That's the main concern, which is ultimately why I put the building where I did. And so I saw some discrepancies as well, as far as, or inconsistencies, that's probably a better term for it. And I thought, well, maybe what I should do is apply to, for single family large, get that setback moved to either 10 or 5 feet for that specific instance. I don't know if we want to address the other ones, but I think it sort of goes in line with what the city's trying to do as far as provide more reasonable housing for the community and having the granny flats and so forth. And so rather than asking for a variance, which I talked to Scarlett about that, and there's a process for that, but also there's still some discussion that Scarlett and I need to have as far as what the cost is for something like that. I thought, well, why don't we just get the interpretation of the code? Because the current interpretation is they see that use as an accessory dwelling unit as a principal use, which sets it at 15 feet. versus a detached building, which is a 5.
Right.
And so I'm just trying to figure it out with you.
Well, I think because you initially got your approval for the building,
Yes,
like a shop, a large shop, basically, and then the idea of making a portion of it an ADU.
correct,
And there is a big difference between a shed, workshop
correct.
versus an ADU. And I think the biggest issue is a building, a shed is not going to be occupied. Where an ADU, that's the whole intent of it to be. So you get into fires and fire setbacks and things like that to make sure
And
between
access
buildings and
all
everything
that.
else.
Yep.
And so I know those are just some of the things. So you guys have any questions? Anybody like to ask Mr. Beckett any questions about it? I know it's something that has been discussed about setbacks because the existing thing treated like it's a residence with the same setbacks as a resident. And that's difficult to do at times at 25 and so much space between the primary home and the others and so forth. So, and it is something that has been looked at, but typically, and I think for Providence, we're a 15-foot between fire code is 15 feet between structures. So, you know, that's a part of it, that if you did an ADU and your neighbor did an ADU, each of you being 7.5 would meet the fire requirements of
Correct.
15 feet. So, and what you're requesting is, because have you built the ADU or split it off the shop? I know that. I think
Yeah,
the
so
shop is
the
built,
shop is built and I have an area that I can,
that you do the ADU.
correct.
Okay, I see what you're saying. So it's ideally, it's just you're looking at that request to amend those setbacks to allow that to be a little bit closer.
Correct. And I think the ideal thing, you know, given the fire code, if you made it 10,
yeah,
then
yeah,
that's an easy one.
right.
Or a detached garage in a single family large zoning.
Well,
Because then you essentially have 10 between, if your neighbor put one in, they would have it at 10 and I would have mine at 10. So then you'd get essentially 20 feet.
Okay, so Scarlett, a code amendment, if we went with the code amendment, would that be retroactive to the building authority started?
Building's fine. But as far as
Right, but what I'm saying is, if we were to do a code amendment, make a change here, is that retroactive or can?
No, it's not retroactive, but if Mr. Beckett has to come in with, he'd have to come in with an application for zoning clearance, and he'd have to come in with a building permit. So
So the building permit's not been issued then?
you haven't
so I
applied for,
have the zoning clearance to put the building up.
right, but not for an accessory dwelling unit.
Correct.
That's what he's looking at now.
Right.
To modify those, to allow, you did the shop over and above setbacks that existed for the building, the
Correct.
shop. And with that in mind of possibly adding the ADU.
Right.
And now, because our setbacks are more in line with residential setbacks, not necessarily taken into consideration for an ADU. So you're looking for the change that would allow you to put that ADU next to the shop and or whether it's next to the shop or not. But
It's
be able to put it
in the shop.
yeah, but yeah, it's part of the shop.
Yeah.
Okay. So, so that's what we're looking at is would we recommend, because this would be a change that city council and mayor would make those changes. We might just make a recommendation.
Yes, you would hold the public hearing, you would take the public comment, then you would make a recommendation, and then it would go on to city council, and then the city council could either agree with your recommendation, they could do their own thing, but they can, depends on what you recommended, they could deny. If you recommended approval, they could still recommend, they could deny it. So all you do is You take the public comment, you forward that on to them, you make a recommendation that gets forwarded on to them, and then they go from there with it.
So there is actually one other avenue. And right now, the interpretation that is being used is that it's the 15 feet. But the way things are written, when I first looked at it, I was like, oh, I can put it at 5 because it's detached. And then when I had further discussions, no, that's not how it's interpreted. So
Yeah. Well, yeah,
And to that point, Chair, the interpretation of law is a judicial matter, which is a council decision. So
and
that would be on
I don't
them.
interpret
No, that's fine.
that, I just try and follow.
But to change the interpretation is a council decision.
Okay.
But we do have a definition for an accessory building.
right.
And then we have a definition for an accessory dwelling unit. So our code definitely recognizes there's a distinction between the two. And so that's where we're coming from. And in the area regulations chart, it does say see accessory building, or excuse me, see accessory dwelling unit for setbacks. So so there is, we do try to distinguish as much or make it as distinguishable as possible. But as if in anything, that's why we have attorneys. There's always someone that wants to question. So we'll see what goes.
Providence said, has the executive staff or the attorney gone up to this point yet or weighed in?
No, we've not. This is something really that's more, I mean, we weighed in a lot with the setback discussion that we had. And this is really something that's more in your hands. We would look at it from a safety point of view. A lot of the points that Michael Fortune has talked about tonight, but we've not looked at it to make a straight up recommendation.
I'm sorry.
So you're asking for the code change just in the single family large. That's your request, not
Yeah,
an
because-
overall change.
Yeah, because most people that have a half acre or more could easily put a building in and have it with the setbacks.
Have them form to do that. So Ryan, what?
Well, I was just going to say, at some point, keep in mind that this changes it for anybody in that zone, not specifically to his. If it were true that this were the case, and he just mentioned single family large, what's wrong with doing it for single family estate? And why wouldn't you have applied for that?
When I cared about was single family.
Point exactly is that he's applying as if it's his, but normally code amendments are applying as if it's generic for all, because that's how it is applied. And you're right, it doesn't go retroactive, but because he hasn't applied for the ADU conversion, the ADU installation, then he would have to follow the new ordinance. So I just point that out.
Because no matter what the code is for a shed or a building, regardless of what the zoning is, the setback requirements for an ADU are specific, whether it's in a large, single family high, whatever. Those setbacks for the ADUs are set for what they are. So the thing that we would look at is would we look at a public hearing from the standpoint of changing the ADU setbacks, reducing them somewhat, that would possibly benefit more people for being able to do that. That's been an issue statewide in regards to ADUs and so forth, that the setbacks prevented a lot of people from being able to put an ADU in. And so the state and other municipalities have looked at reducing that down, some to an extreme where it's, well, whatever a shed is, that would work, but that isn't fire code. Yeah, and then you have one neighbor that whoever gets in first does that, and then the other one has to bear the burden of the fire code. So we need something consistent in that. So my thoughts are, to ask you what your thoughts are. And then I'll tell you my thoughts. I personally would like to see it go to a public hearing to get the feedback, because I believe there have been, I know that we have had people approach us for doing ADUs, but the setback issues prevented what they wanted to do. And so my feeling is that I would put it to a public hearing to get the public's feedback.
One thing that we would need to do actually is we would need to amend 2 ordinances to make this work. We would have to amend the ADU, because as you pointed out, it calls out that the ADU will be built to the primary structure, so that we didn't have conflicting setbacks. We would either not change the setback ordinance and change the ADU ordinance, or we'd change them both, so that maybe take the setbacks out of the ADU ordinance and put a column or put a line for accessory dwelling units, so all setbacks are on the same page, which is probably from a staff perspective, that's a little bit better, because we don't go look somewhere else for any other setback really, except for ADUs. And so to have them all on the same chart would be beneficial. Ryan, what do you think about that?
I agree. I mean, I think at this point, your steps forward are, if you want to go to a public hearing, then you take it, you get that feedback. But I would guess that if you went forward to change it, at that point, it's probably not going to be written this way. No offense, it's probably going to be sent to the attorney to have it.
People attend, so you can.
But it got to your point. But then we would send it off. We'd come back and say, okay, if this is the desire of the commission, we'd come back, we'd have another meeting to have it drafted, formalize that language, and then pass it to council when the commission was ready. At this point, this is a study one just to start and to see if you're interested in that. If you weren't, at that point you said, well, this isn't it. Maybe you're fleshing out some things here, and that's what we're looking for.
Yes, you're true.
Hope you don't mind. The previous council put a lot of effort into the accessory dwelling units. Recently, the city filed our moderate income housing report that's required by the state of Utah as part of our general plan. And I think there are 23 things that I think you check. How many of them?
That's
Boxes,
5.
or what is it?
Could have 5 of them, right?
We had 5.
Okay, so there's 23 options to be in compliance with state code. And you check enough boxes, then you're in compliance, you're okay. But one of the boxes we checked was accessory dwelling, meaning we're complying with the state's legislature's intent of expanding housing options. One of the very last in the code that was passed in 2019, the very last sentence says the mayor and city staff shall report to the council once a year the number of new accessory dwelling units permitted during the previous 12 months. This report shall be made to the council no later than 30 days after the end of the calendar year. Near the beginning, it says, I'll just paraphrase, but it just says that it starts out with a policy of Providence City promote and encourage the creation of legal accessory dwelling units. The intent of this ordinance is to provide a broader range of affordable housing options to generate these benefits. And I think, Michael, you probably had the conversation with Scarlett. How many actual accessory dwelling units, separate dwelling units have been built since this was passed 2.5 years ago, almost 3 years ago? How many have been approved that fit within the code?
I'd have to look for sure. I think 2.
Two. So in my opinion, and you might agree, that this is not, the way the code's written is not meeting the intent of accessory dwelling units. And what Mr. Beckett's bringing up is exactly the reason why we haven't seen more. And I think Scarlett would say there's probably a dozen that have come to her and said, I want to build an accessory dwelling unit. They couldn't, and it was the setbacks.
Right.
So we can leave this the way it is, and it may get to the council and they may choose to leave it the way it is, but then it's just window dressing. And we don't want just window dressing, do we? We actually want to see some. There's some,
city. Yeah.
makes sense. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I've always said, let the planning commission not be the one that says, no, you can't do it, but can't do it that way, but here's another way.
Any further discussion? Anybody have any on it?
Are there any other cures? I'm going to ask Scarlett this. Are there any other cures in this? Is it a matter of rezoning parcel? Would that change or?
And it's not an ADU.
Yeah, if it's an ADU,
It's not a matter of zoning because ADUs are allowed in our residential zones. So it's not a matter of zoning, it's a matter of the setbacks. And because the setbacks in the ADU says that the ADU section in Providence City Code 10, Chapter 13, in there it talks about the accessory dwelling, that's the accessory dwelling unit section. And it says that they will meet the setbacks for the principal structure in that zone. And so it really wouldn't matter because all of the zones have the same, except for the single family high, all of the zones have the same setbacks. Oh, well, I take that back. Ag has a different setback and single family high has a different setback. But the other single family residential zones are all the same.
Single family high, if I remember correctly, is at 10 feet.
Well, even in single family high, the rear yard is at 15.
Is it? Okay.
Multifamily, you can apply for multifamily.
Multifamily is at 10, is that
I
correct?
think so.
okay.
So is it worth going to, Michael, is it worth going to the trouble of finding out why this was passed? Is this strictly a fire issue? If it's a fire issue, are there ways to rectify it? Where we insist on sprinkler system?
I think my biggest thing is, I'm sorry, did you have a comment, Neil?
We were plowing new ground to answer your question. So honestly, we didn't, the fire setback and all that was okay. We didn't bring it up because it didn't bump up against the fire code limits. So, I mean, we were establishing new law,
So they're pretty much our
city code. We had a lot of discussion. We looked at every subsection of it and looked at options that were liberal and some that were tighter and in between. And for the most part, we tried to find ones that were fairly liberal. The setbacks we didn't spend much time on. We thought it was reasonable that if the setbacks were the same as the primary residence, then that probably made sense.
Well, and those have been established. I mean, there was a lot of work behind setting those. So if it was the same, it'd be so. And the state has realized the same challenge. All throughout the state, the issue has been, it doesn't allow me to make this work. I need it, I want it, but I can't make it work with that. And so the state and other municipalities have looked at changing those setbacks to the point of making sure that it's safety, which really comes down to the fire issue and that, and having it consistent. So I think that's where it is. And so my thought is that we go, but I'd like to suggest that we move forward with a public hearing. So we get feedback and then go from there.
I believe that's the way to go.
I remember we worked on these setbacks and we muddled through it and we had numerous meetings. And maybe it's time that it's got to be looked at again. Obviously, it's not working. I don't think variance is going to work because this will probably this issue will pop up again and the variance won't take care of it.
Well, it seems I was here just for the tail end of that. And I remember that there wasn't anything concrete to make that decision. It was.
We kind of buzzed through it, I believe, right?
I'd like to comment, Bob, it could be muddled through.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. Mr. Beckett, thank you very much. I appreciate
Thanks
it.
for coming this time.
Nice to meet you.
Sorry, I travel too much. It's like out of control.
We're just
some days.
giving you a hard time.
But thank you. I'm glad you accommodated me the last time via Zoom, so.
Yeah.
Yeah, you just didn't come through. The call must have been a hard spot because we had too much, couldn't hear you real well, and then I think lost the call.
No, it's always painful with technology. Thank you.
Thank you. So I would propose that we ask to put it on the agenda where we can have a public hearing.
A public hearing to review setbacks
To,
on accessory dwelling units or on accessory units?
yes, that the idea of looking at changing that, of recommending a change and justifying why it would be for ADU setbacks.
Just as a clarification, can we have it on when we have the same public hearing for the other one? So I mean, if we're going to get public, it's nice to put those public hearings together so they can all come and join us together. Thank you, Brian, and the chair.
Okay. That's all we have.
When do we close this meeting?
So, hold on.
I don't think David Knight is here. Did he leave already?
Yeah, I
Okay.
had to, yes,
Question.
come up to the microphone, sorry. That's okay. Everything gets recorded and then transcribed.
Does that mean that the next meeting on January 12th is when?
It would be January the
26th.
26th would be the public hearing for it.
Okay, and would you like me in attendance? Because I know I'm out of town.
I think we've
Well, we would always like.
Yeah.
Everything goes much
Yeah.
smoother.
Yeah,
Okay, so
Your
probably
representative
be
you can
questions.
send if you want.
I have my wife who refused to come.
Oh,
So
Understandable.
she's like, this is yours.
So you're gonna zoom in.
Could
No,
you,
I'll have to zoom in.
could you, yeah, I was just going to ask, could you?
Yeah, I can do that. Okay.
thank you.
The reason why I asked if David Knight was here is that sometimes we get people saying
Sign
the
the
wrong
wrong
sheet
one or whatever.
Well, David spoke about the city, the town center.
Yeah.
Okay.
So he was here.
Okay, we have a motion to close the meeting. Just so everybody knows, our next meeting is January the 12th. That we have set for this time. So we have a motion to close the meeting,
Second.
second to close the meeting.
Merry Christmas.
That's in my mind.
did a motion and a second.
You've done it all.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much. The meeting is adjourned.
Merry Christmas, everyone.
Bye, everybody. Merry Christmas.
Have a good holiday.
Thank you,
everyone.
Tyler. Appreciate it.